Today, we'll explore one of the most horrific events in modern history, Nanjing Massacre and mass rape. During the winter of 1937, the capital city of China, Nanking, became the site of unimaginable brutality at the hands of the Imperial Japanese Army. Over the course of 6 weeks, the Japanese military committed acts so savage that even today, it remains difficult to comprehend. Tens of thousands of innocent civilians were slaughtered, and women of all ages faced unspeakable horrors. While many know about the atrocities of World War II in Europe, the rape of Nanking remains less discussed. This is the story of those whose voices were silenced and whose suffering has too often been overlooked by history. By the 1930s, Japan had begun its expansion into mainland Asia, aiming to establish dominance across the continent. Following their successful capture of Shanghai in late 1937, the Japanese army set its sights on Nanking. The city, a symbol of Chinese resistance, and the capital of the Republic of China, was unprepared for the horrors that would follow. Japanese military culture at the time was deeply entrenched in a mindset of superiority and ruthless discipline. From a young age, Japanese boys were indoctrinated with militaristic ideals. They were taught to revere war and despise their enemies, especially the Chinese, whom they were trained to view as subhuman. Schools became breeding grounds for future soldiers, preparing young men to serve their country's imperial ambitions. This militaristic indoctrination, combined with deep-rooted racism, fueled the behavior of Japanese soldiers as they prepared to attack Nanking. What happened next would shock the world and leave a permanent scar on history. On December 13, 1937, Nanking fell. The city's defenses crumbled under the relentless assault, and within hours, Japanese troops poured into the city. But instead of occupying the city in a traditional sense, they unleashed a wave of terror that few could have imagined. Chinese soldiers who had surrendered, hoping for fair treatment, were rounded up and executed in cold blood. Machine guns tore through groups of captives, while others were used for bayonet practice or simply doused in gasoline and set alight. An estimated 260,000 to 350,000 people were killed in Nanking over 6 weeks. But the true horror of Nanking was not just the mass murder, it was the brutality of how these killings were carried out. Between 20,000 and 80,000 women were raped during the occupation. The Japanese soldiers showed no mercy. Young girls, elderly women, and even pregnant women were subjected to horrific acts of violence. Many victims were not just raped, but mutilated. Soldiers would disembowel women, slice off their breasts, or nail them to walls while they were still alive. This was not just an invasion. It was a complete annihilation of human dignity. Kozo Takakoro, a former Japanese soldier, later admitted that many women were abducted and forced into military trucks, where they were assigned to groups of soldiers. Some women were raped by as many as 15 to 20 men, often resulting in their death. After their horrific abuse, most of these women were killed. The military had an unofficial policy. After raping the women, soldiers were to execute them to prevent them from speaking. The violence was so extreme that it shocked even those within the Japanese military. As the days passed, the chaos only grew worse. The Japanese military systematically moved through the city, looting homes and businesses, killing anyone who tried to resist. Entire families were dragged from their homes and murdered in cold blood. The rivers and streets of Nanking ran red with the blood of its citizens. One Japanese correspondent who witnessed the massacre described how prisoners were lined up along the riverbanks. The first row was beheaded, while the second row was forced to dump the bodies into the water before they, too, were executed. This macabre process went on for days. Even seasoned war correspondents were left horrified by what they witnessed in Nanking. Many who had followed the Japanese troops into the city could not bring themselves to write about the sheer scale of the atrocities. But the world eventually learned of the horror that unfolded. In the midst of this horror, a small group of foreigners attempted to save as many lives as they could. Led by John Rabe, a German businessman and leader of the local Nazi Party, these individuals established the Nanking Safety Zone, a haven where around 250,000 civilians found refuge. Despite his affiliation with the Nazi Party, Rabe's actions in Nanking were heroic. He risked his own life to protect Chinese civilians, repeatedly confronting Japanese soldiers and pleading for mercy. Thanks to the efforts of Rabe and others, thousands of lives were saved, even as the rest of the city descended into hell. After the war, the rape of Nanking did not receive the same global attention as other atrocities of World War II. The reasons are complex. China, divided between the communist government and Taiwan, did not demand reparations from Japan, choosing instead to focus on political recognition and trade relationships. Cold War tensions also played a role, as Western nations, including the United States, wanted to maintain a positive relationship with Japan to counter the rise of communism in Asia. This silence allowed the rape of Nanking to fade into the shadows of history. Unlike the Holocaust or the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Nanking remained an obscure chapter in the annals of World War II. Today, Nanking is not forgotten. Memorials have been erected in the city to honor the victims, and survivors have shared their stories in the hope that history will never forget. However, the scars of Nanking run deep. Many survivors lived in silence for decades, too traumatized to speak of their experiences. It is our responsibility to ensure that their stories are not lost. The atrocities that occurred in Nanking remind us of the depths of human cruelty, but they also stand as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As we reflect on the events that transpired in Nanking, it's crucial to remember that history, though painful, must be acknowledged to ensure such horrors are never repeated. The massacre, the violence, and the sheer inhumanity that was witnessed over those 6 weeks in 1937 must never fade from memory. The rape of Nanking is more than just a dark chapter in Chinese history. It's a global reminder of what happens when power, hatred, and prejudice go unchecked. The lives lost, the dignity stripped away, and the generational trauma caused must be honored by keeping their stories alive. Thank you for joining us on this journey into one of history's most forgotten atrocities. Remember, the past may be behind us, but it still holds the power to shape our present and future. Let us honor the memory of those lost by keeping their stories alive, not just in textbooks, but in our collective consciousness. This is Crimes Uncloaked, where we shine a light on the darkest corners of human history. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and always seek the truth.